Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack one of history's greatest underdog stories, the American Revolution. On paper, it looked like an impossible fight. So how in the world did it happen?
Okay, let's just dive right into this question. When you look at the matchup, it seems like a foregone conclusion. This was a true David versus Goliath story, pitting a brand new, volunteer army against the most powerful military force on the entire planet.
First, let's really set the stage here, because you have to appreciate the sheer imbalance of power between these two sides. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
So on one side, you have the British Empire. We're talking about a global superpower with a massive professional army, the world's most dominant navy, and a treasury that could fund a long global war. These guys were the undisputed champions, and they were absolutely confident in their military might.
And on the other side, well, you've got a collection of colonies with an army made up of farmers, merchants, and volunteers. Brave people for sure, but they were often poorly equipped, poorly trained, and serving short-term enlistments. And a navy? Forget about it. They had basically nothing. So how could victory even be possible? The answer is really fascinating. It's a mix of American advantages and, crucially, a set of hidden British weaknesses that the colonists were able to exploit.
So let's get into those weaknesses. Let's look at Britain's biggest challenges and see how their greatest asset, this massive global empire, was, in this case, also their greatest liability.
The first, and maybe most staggering problem, was just simple geography. The fight wasn't next door. It was an entire ocean away.
3,000 miles. Just think about what that number actually meant back in the 18th century. It represented a logistical nightmare of truly epic proportions.
And this wasn't just some inconvenience. It had massive strategic implications. Every soldier, every musket, every cannonball, every bit of food had to cross the Atlantic. It meant that news of battles, requests for supplies, and strategic orders would show up in England long after they were even relevant, making it nearly impossible for leaders in London to plan effectively. But the problems weren't just at sea. They were also happening right back home in Great Britain. The war was facing some serious issues on the home front that fundamentally weakened the entire effort. And this right here is a critical point. The government just could not sell the war to its own people. A lot of them saw it as a family squabble, not some vital national interest. And as the war dragged on and the costs just kept mounting, British taxpayers got less and less happy about footing the massive bill. This was a huge contrast to the Patriots, who were fighting for their own homes and for this powerful idea of liberty.
And that brings us to the third critical weakness, leadership. Because even with all these logistical and political problems, a brilliant strategy might have overcome them. But at the top, the man chosen to direct the British troops, well, he had a fatal blind spot. Meet Lord George Germain. He was essentially the director of the whole war effort. His problem? He had no real sense of what he was up against because, get this, he had never even been to North America. He was completely disconnected from the reality on the ground.
Germain really believed this was a traditional European war. He thought if he could just capture a few key cities, like Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, the rebellion would collapse. He just completely failed to realize this was a war for hearts and minds, fought across a huge territory. To win, his forces would have had to crush the Patriots' will to fight, state by state, a task he was totally unprepared for. Meanwhile, you've got George Washington understanding his main goal wasn't to win every battle, but just to keep the army and the revolution itself alive. So Germain kept hoping for a quick victory that was never, ever going to happen.
So, okay, let's put all of this together. How did these British weaknesses create a path for an American victory? It's a fantastic story of how an underdog can win by outlasting, not just overpowering, a giant. When you lay it all out like this, you can really see how these three core weaknesses were all connected. The distance, the lack of public support, and the flawed leadership weren't separate problems at all. They were a recipe for disaster. And here's how they created that vicious cycle. The distance made the war incredibly expensive. Those high costs destroyed public support back home. And that lack of support put immense pressure on bad leaders to find a quick fix, which led them to make even more strategic blunders. You see? Each problem just made the others worse.
So the crucial takeaway is this. While the patriotism and perseverance of the American colonists were absolutely essential, their victory wasn't just about their own strength. It was equally about British vulnerability. The colonists won by outlasting a superpower that was fighting against itself as much as it was fighting them.
You know, this story offers a timeless lesson. A smaller, more agile force with a powerful motivation can often defeat a larger, more powerful opponent that's bogged down by its own size and complexity. It's a pattern we see again and again in history, in business, in technology, which leaves us with a final thought to consider. When a giant is fighting on the wrong terms, who really has the advantage?